Throughout the history of CS, generally the best player on a given map every year is around the 1.3 rating. Sometimes they get a little bit higher. I believe Simple on Nuke once got closer to 1.4. But Donk on Dust2 is by far the highest there has ever been on Dust2. In the last 12 months, he's at a 1.53 rating. Okay, the only players that have gotten higher, special shout out to Sponge, who got like 1.4 over 3 maps in 2016, is JKS, who got a 2.03 over 1 map in 2017. Okay, Donk is actually the GOAT of Dust2 very clearly. And if you just look at what his theoretical strengths and weaknesses should be, obviously Dust2 is very high up there. It's a map that's great for aim duels. Then if you look at the way I think Chopper calls, which is very much in-game reads based, I think he's kind of like, I said he's kind of like knockoff Kerrigan at some point. I don't know if he's like necessarily, he's definitely got some differences, but I think he does play that kind of like mind game style, in mid-game adaptation style CS with his calling, where he tries to call, sometimes I feel a little too heavily based on what he expects his opponents to react to the previous round from. I mean, someone could disagree with that because this is just kind of reading into the way that their games play, but that's kind of the way I see it. And so I think that also leans very heavily into the strengths of a Dust2 team. Both of those things together, that might lead to Donk being the GOAT of Dust2. Now, he didn't get anything done on pistol round, kind of doesn't really matter. Instantly tagged as a scout on the second round, not exactly what you're looking for. And by the way, this actually isn't Donk's best map of the tournament. This is kind of a lower, I mean, he still gets like a 1.93, but it's kind of like lower in relation to the Blast Bounty tournament, but it's a closer map. There's actually a good amount of rounds, so he's actually going to be fighting against guns, because I was worried if I looked at something like the Eternal Fire game where he gets like a 2.3 rating, he's just going to be eco farming a lot of the time, you know what I mean? One of the things is, it's not just going to be about aim. You want to look at a player like Donk, it feels nice to imagine that Donk's abilities are just about aim, and let's be real, a lot of them are about aim or movement, just like general mechanics, but there's a lot more that goes into it to play at that high of a level and to make it hard for opponents to actually be able to counter you, because you do have to be making adjustments in the mid game. You do have to be making sure that you're not doing the same plays too often. You have to be thinking about all of these types of things. But first gun round comes around, very slow clear. He's solo in upper B tunnels. I believe it's Zontix that came through lower, maybe it was Chopper come through lower to help him clear out. They basically just dry clear up short. Now, the reason this is viable is because it's round 3, which means the odds of the CTs having an op are quite low, and they've already lost the player fairly early on in the round. So it makes a lot of sense to start taking some risks when you have lost the player already, you don't have a ton of utility, and your opponents are unlikely to have an op. Then you can start to take a few risks in terms of how you clear things. Now, initially here, Zontix is going to go up first. Donk follows actually quite close behind. Now, in traditional kind of entry pathing, usually what you really want is you want your second player to follow a very similar or the same pathing as the first player, because you want to make sure that if the first player dies, the second player will be in position to trade. One of the worst things that can happen is something like on Mirage, the first guy goes out to Tetris, second guy swings in the bomb site, or the first guy swings into the bomb site and the second guy goes to Tetris, first guy dies, and there's nobody there that could possibly trade because, well, the second guy went to safety instead of went with his teammate. Now, the question past that is, how far behind should you be? Well, the slower you're clearing, so if you're doing those jiggle clears that you saw Zontix doing there, where you're actually trying to make sure that your first player, you try and make sure he takes a good engagement and he has a good chance of winning the duel, then the second player ends up being a little closer to behind because he wants to be able to fight that player that the first player is fighting as the first player is fighting him. Whereas if you're swinging into the bomb site, then you're really kind of sacrificing the first player, and that means you want the second player a little bit further behind. But he ends up getting one there, then moving into the bomb site. I mean, obviously, if you're going to have a player with, oh my god, that's a sick shot, with this high of a rating, there's most likely something else that goes into it other than just his own gameplay, and getting dropped, weapons and utility sometimes is definitely one of those things, because Dust2 is one of those maps where a single player kind of baiting his team into the B site with an AK, his team runs in with a Tech 9, it's easy for him to win his team the round with a couple of nice shots, and it wasn't 2 shots from Donk there, but he did kill the initial rotate, which is the most important rotator to kill because it allows the free bomb plant, and that ends up being essentially securing the round based off his teammate getting the initial kill and him getting the second. Or actually, it might have been inverted. He actually might have got the kill on the player outside first, but either way, another kill for Donk. And I mean, the thing is, on down rounds where Donk isn't multi-fragging, he's still finding a way to get a kill. He got 2 kills last round where he killed the guy initially, then he catches a player rotating off. Then he's going to be, I mean, this is kind of where you're expecting the most action to happen. In fact, if you look at, like, I had a stat I was looking at using to try and define some things, like to try and define how aggressive or passive a player was playing. One of the stats I was using was engagements. So that was kill. So a lot of people use kill to death ratio, and kill to death ratio you can use to, like, say how effective someone is in gun rounds, how effective someone is against pistols, obviously. But you can also use kill plus deaths, and I was calling that engagements. And I was using that as like an engagements ratio, like how aggressive is a player against pistols? Well, you can look at how many kills plus deaths they have, because it's hard to define. Like, if you look at Apex, for example, on anti-ecos, he doesn't actually take that many more engagements. The thing is his KD is a lot higher, so it might seem like he's eco hunting, but well, Apex actually is a bad example, but some players aren't necessarily eco hunting. It just, they get a lot of kills on anti-eco because they just don't lose their duels, right? So I was using engagements as to define that, but it was also just an interesting stat in general. And obviously Donk is far ahead of almost anyone else that's actually good. I actually think he was just right up at the top, period, like way ahead, because he just plays hyper aggressive. And it's so crazy that he can play as aggressive as he does and still be as effective as he is. You know, the only player that had a similar opening kill attempt percent on gun rounds, so when you and your opponents both have guns, the only player that was even close to Donk at 40% was Yekindar. And that's the type of player you expect to have 40% of rounds where you have guns and your opponents have guns, which is usually when you want to be a little bit more controlled. 40% of the time, Donk either dies first or gets the kill first. Well, this isn't updated. This was like the middle of 2024 I did this, but at the time it was 40%, and you really haven't seen Donk change his playstyle all that much since, right? When we look at why is Donk actually so good on this map? Well, obviously his team is setting him up fairly effectively. They're not walking him into traps. He's very, very often the second player out, even when clearing positions. He's in tunnels alone, but when he actually goes for hits out towards B, when he goes through lower tunnels, he's generally not the first player out. And when they go for positions like this, now this is where Donk does get very aggressive. This is where they do put Donk, where they try and say, look, we're going to put you out there. We're going to say, Donk, we need you to get a kill because we're 3v5. It's cool if you trade in a 5v5, but if you trade in a 3v5, then you're in a 2v4. And that's not exactly a better situation, right? Like, we need Donk to go out first and get the kill. Now, a lot of the times, they're going to set him up in situations like that where he does go out first, and they have some execs like this on Dust2 as well, where he will go out first, or he'll take an alternative pathing to go out second, and it'll be intended to get him a kill with a flash. It'll give him a really good opportunity to get a frag. But in this case, it's more about just YOLO out and see if you can find someone. I mean, he didn't YOLO out. He had plenty of time, but at the same time, YOLO, hope you don't run into an op. And in this case, he will be the first player moving out towards B site here because you have a reasonable chance of actually getting kills. He doesn't usually hard swing a lot of angles, and this is something that people have been critical of Xertion for, because oh my god, the pre-aims are so sick, dude. Like, Xertion in group stages plays a lot like this, where you can see the exec is coming in, but different execs require different speeds, different pacing, different timing. And this is an exec where he doesn't necessarily need to have the fastest pacing to beat the rotates, because they have utility to deal with that. And they know they've set up, like, they've tried to draw that mid player off of position. I just want to see what this looks like from Bit's POV. You see, Donk just beats the timing. Bit has this internal timing where he knows where, like, okay, he just saw Donk with a nade out. This is about how long Donk is going to take to repeat, and Donk is just a quarter of a second faster. And so Bit looks away to try and make sure he can kill someone that comes out tunnels, because you don't want to over focus on that side. This is something you see people do with flashes a lot, where, like, lower level players, if a flash comes onto their screen, the moment they see it, they turn around and then they turn back once it pops. But you see high level players very often, they see a flash on their screen, they know based on the trajectory basically how long it's been there, and they wait. I mean, it's not always specifically for flashes that are thrown from here, like this flash that I toss on this box. Low level players, like this is a very good flash to throw at lower levels because your opponents, they'll just turn, you'll get the free kill. At a high enough level, people start to see that, know the flash is coming, wait, and then you peek into them and they turn just for a quarter of a second at the end, and because they're trying to utilize all the time that they have to make sure they're not vulnerable at any given moment. But when you look at how it can go wrong, well, if Donk just beats that timing by a quarter of a second, then you just die. And I mean, obviously Bit wasn't at the biggest disadvantage of all time there either. It's not like he couldn't actually have picked up the kill onto Donk if Donk had missed, but obviously Donk isn't gonna miss. And Donk doesn't need that extra quarter of a second, because sometimes you might take an extra quarter of a second to line up where Bit is going to be when you go for that repeat. Donk is just fucking that much faster. Damn. That was such a small play, but it's like so impressive that even against Donk, the small ways he finds opportunities to get kills that just catch his opponents off guard, where it's not necessarily only his aim. Look, the reason that I question, and I still question how long Donk can keep this up, is because riflers' peaks are generally a lot more fleeting. You look at any player that's a rifler other than Nico, how consistently have they ever been at the top? You know, you've got Cold Zera that was up for 2 years, huge fall off after 2 years. Elige has probably been the closest. I'm trying to think of if anyone else I'm missing. Elige has been up there for a while, but he's had times where he's hit rough patches, you know. I think 2020, 2021, I think he really struggled. Naf is probably maybe another really close one, or Electronic. I'm kind of sleeping on Electronic, but even these players like Naf and Electronic that kind of break the mold, they have down years and they have up years, and a lot of the time, you know, it really does base heavily around how their aim is feeling. If they have a year where their aim is slightly off, then they have to adjust, because as a rifler, basically the thing about CS that is the reason I think players fall off and like people think there's an age limit is because as a player you get a good idea of the types of engagements you can and cannot take, right? Donk is going to take different engagements, he's going to take different gunfights, he's going to find different moments to get aggressive, even in the micro, where like that repeak on the Bit. Now, that's a repeat Donk makes, but maybe someone like Magic, someone like Chopper, maybe they wait a second because they don't think that they're actually going to win that duel as much. They wait a second to allow their teammate to be in a better position to trade instead of assuming they're going to find that kill. And as you as you get older, maybe you play a little bit less, your aim gets a little bit worse, and then you start having to reinvent the entire way you play the game. Even the angles, that how far you hold your crosshair from a corner, you know, you might have to change that, and that can really adjust what angles are effective, because even a quote-unquote good angle, if I'm ever doing a demo review, I do those on Patreon, by the way. I haven't done one in a while, though. I'll often say something like your mileage may vary in certain situations. You know, some things are good, some things are bad, some things are your mileage may vary, this might work for you, because there are peaks that you might make that are good for you, that work for you, that don't work for everyone. Or more specifically, like more commonly, is there are peaks that are good that just don't work for certain people. Like there are peaks that I used to not be able to make that almost every, like, because I used to op when I was playing a lot, and it would be like there were certain peaks where it was just like, look, I know most hoppers can take this angle, it just doesn't work for me. I don't know, it's just not comfortable for me. I just die when I peek people, you know. With riflers, I feel like that's more common, that's more of a problem, and it's harder for them to adjust. And so it's rare to see someone play at such an insane individual level in terms of aim and be able to actually sustain it. Usually you see peaks this high level for a few months at a time when it comes to riflers. Oppers, it's more, I mean, it's the big green. I feel like it's a little easier to fall back on safety, on consistent, good, advantageous angles rather than rifles, where, I mean, ops are like a strategic weapon because, you know, if as long as you don't whiff, you can put yourself in position to get kills very often, whereas rifles feel more 50-50. They feel more like you could have a good engagement, you could lose it, even if it's a great engagement. You could easily lose it. Your opponent just hits a nice shot, or you just hit a shot, you know, you just miss a couple extra bullets, they can always hit an instant headshot onto you, right? But one of the things that makes me hopeful, all of this huge rant to get back around to the point of one of the things that makes me hopeful for Donk is that there is a lot more to it. It's not just that he's running out there out aiming everyone. It's not that he's doing like the the one-tap style, CS Scream style, like running around one-tapping people where as soon as his aim goes down a little bit, he's going to really struggle. He's actually really, really good with spray control. He's actually got really effective timings. His movement is insanely hard to deal with. He makes it very hard for people to hit him. He knows when to trade frag. Like, he does a lot of things incredibly right. And when it comes down to it, if you can do all those things right, even if you have a downswing in terms of your aim, there's a good chance that you can actually pivot back and be able to deal with that. Now, this is some donk shit to some extent. I mean, Ime has a FAMAS. Is that a great gun? No. Is that a gun he's supposed to get, that's supposed to die, and then Wonderful's also supposed to die? Also no. Now, Wonderful kind of whiffs here, I think. He's, like, long range. Donk just knows, like... Yeah, I mean, Wonderful does just kind of miss there. Donk, I mean, if Donk was 1 HP, I would be like, yeah, that's a nice kill from Donk. But Donk's getting that kill no matter what, because Donk just transitioned from kill number 1 to kill number 2 a little too effectively, and Wonderful kind of just panicked there, I feel like. I don't know, his recoil control just wasn't on point, and he hit Donk for, what, 20 damage, because Ime also hit him with the FAMAS a couple of times. People have talked about this enough. The Donk slide, people miss on Donk more than they should. And a lot of that is to do with his movement, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the game. That's what you want to do. The game is going by pretty quick while I've been talking very little about how Donk actually plays, because T-side, one of the things, again, about riflers is oftentimes they're part of the system, right? They have to go with their team. That means if the call's bad, they might end up basically sacrificing themselves to a bad call, to getting, dunked by nades. Oh my God. This guy is fucking insane. Every time I see Donk, sometimes I thought to myself, because like when I was like hitting the peak of my gameplay when I was playing a lot, I felt like I was playing it at like a very high level, and I was hitting shots, and sometimes I would hit a shot and I'd just be like, yeah, I don't really know how I hit that. I mean, it was just like I just hit some insane fucking instant flick, and I'd be like, I don't really know how I hit that, but I hit it. And then after enough time, like, 2-3 months playing at this level, I would just expect to hit those, but I still like was really like, damn, that was a ridiculous shot. Like, I don't really know, like, what the fuck was that? Like, and I would still hit shots like that sometimes. And I sometimes question, like, does Simple, like, do they sit there, do they hit a shot and they're like, yeah, that was fucking bullshit. Like, like, that was straight bullshit. I don't know how I hit that. That was a ridiculous shot. Like, my hand just went to his head. Like the FPS Doug thing where he's like, my dad owns a gun shop. I don't think, he doesn't want to say it, but I don't think he really wants me to be around, because anytime I get a gun in my hand, I just automatically point to someone's head. It's just, there's nothing, I just can't help it. This video is gonna get demonetized because of that. Yeah, but damn, dude. Watching Donk, I know how good Donk is, but at the same time, I still watch these clips and I'm like, what the fuck? That second kill top mid. He gets the first kill. I think was it the first kill or the second kill? I don't know. Both of them were fucking quick, dog. Fuck. Jesus. Damn. Blast has that reaction time counter where it's like, how fast do people shoot? And I never got to see one on Donk. Maybe they showed one. Man, those shots, whew, Donk's got to have some of the fastest, and like, so people have talked about reactions don't necessarily make you a good CS player. Like, if you look at CS players, they don't necessarily have the fastest reactions. I don't know how true that is, to be completely honest. Now, you can have someone that's got slower reactions. They're gonna have to play a slightly different style. Can you play like Donk if your reactions are like below average? I don't really know you could, because how fast you click, how fast you react to someone so you can shoot at them quicker, so you can crouch under their bullets quicker, so you can counter strafe quicker, that is pretty fucking important. However, it doesn't mean you can't play a style. It's like, you can have a style that doesn't emphasize your reactions. The reason I was questioning is like, is that the case? Is because if you do a human benchmark reaction time test, well, that's different than how fast you react in game. How fast you move your mouse to target in game is also different, because some people might see someone target recognition versus target acquisition, where you actually get the target and you can actually put your crosshair on them. Might be different timings as well. Whatever. Okay, here we have Chopper kind of baiting himself a little bit for Donk, but Chopper's got an MP9, and Chopper's actually the one that gets the kill, especially because Donk was kind of like pre-aiming the first player, and Chopper ends up getting the kill. And then Jail. I mean, the thing about Donk is that I feel like he rarely dies to mediocre shots. I think that's the key, because if both players hit a nice shot, then Donk can die a decent amount of the time, and he definitely does die, right? I mean, Jail hit a pretty nice shot there, Donk died. When both players don't hit a nice shot, I feel like Donk transitions into finishing his opponent off so much faster than most players. It's hard to deal with, because he's just got the whole pack. Okay, all right. So one of the things Donk does is he's actually not necessarily always in the same position, and he does play towards B quite often with this double up. Now, one of the things him and I think it's Zontix that play B, they do this little double up where sometimes they have Chopper up here, or Donk up here, and Zontix down below, and they're like right on top of each other, trying to duel players that are going for like that op played B sometimes, or they're going for those aggressive plays trying to deal with Donk, or trying to find a pick early. And I think that's one of the more effective things that they do. That also is another way that Donk can find openings. An extra way you can find openings is these types of peeks in mid. That's a peek that has some risk, but he's doing it when his team has no weaponry, right? So that's the type of play you want to be making if you're Donk in that situation. Try and find an opening to get yourself a kill, especially if it's a gun that you can potentially retrieve, which he could have if he got that kill. The following round, he's going to get dropped an M4 back. I mean, Chopper dropped him in the M4 in the previous round. These are the types of sacrifices you're expecting if you have Donk with a 1.53 rating, the best of all time on Dust2. These are generally the type of things that are going to have to be done, and they stay very active on the map. So they go for the initial long control, then they're going to go for the short control. Magix is playing anti-flash in the relative unsafety. Donk is playing over here where he's kind of relatively more safe. He's a lot more guaranteed to get a kill. And if he wants, he can actually drop off and go for this, go for a peek towards mid if people are lurking out, or drop off for the fast rotate. He's not even going to get that initial kill here. And you can see, I mean, this is a game where he drops like a 1.9 rating or something like that. And he's not necessarily hitting every single shot, but Donk doesn't panic. That's one of the biggest things I feel like. Donk doesn't panic, you know? If he misses a shot, he knows he's going to get the kill afterwards. He knows he doesn't have to worry about it. And in this case, he's not trying to force this engagement on a Bit. He knows that Bit has to peek Magix first, and if Magix makes contact, Donk can peek off for the trade. Now, that is baiting, but that's the type of baiting you really want to see your teams doing. Because if you're not baiting there, that's how you lose a 2v1, because you're not playing together. So fake long control from Na'Vi. I think they might have wanted Bit to actually make his way out, but didn't end up happening. So you have Donk insta rotate back over, considering if he wants to rotate back, jump up the boxes. Maybe he was thinking about going CT, or he wants to make his way onto plat. Both are pretty reasonable. Obviously, Spirit do play their CT side a little bit around Donk. They kind of allow him to go to different positions if he wants to. And I've noticed in games where Donk isn't being activated, they will try to make sure that their opponents can't avoid Donk. You can't just go B every round and not see Donk, because they'll put Donk as the triple B, as the double B, whatever, from time to time. So this is where, Navi's gonna pick up some rounds here, right? They do pick up a few, but this isn't one of them, actually. I thought they had a free runway into B, but they decided to make their way back to A. Donk finds a way to pick up one. 12-6 scoreline now, and Navi will pick up a few rounds. Donk quietly. He's been keeping it down, toned down. He's 25-10. It's like, it's just ridiculous, man. This kid's a fucking goat of Dust2. Honestly, the question I have really is, how many years does Donk have to keep up this level of gameplay before he is in contention, before he is in conversation with players like Simple? This is the highest peak we've ever seen. Rifling is harder than opping. People take this for granted. Rifling at this high of a level, it's fucking harder than opping, dude. Look at the top 10, HLTV top 10. It is dominated by oppers all the time. The only riflers you see are Donk and Electronic, Axile once in a while. Usually, and a lot of the time it's one-off years where they have an insane peak, because opping is a strategic play. You have an op in a good position. You can have a bad game as an opper without dumping your stats the same way as you can as a rifler. I think that's the way it really is. You're having a good game as an opper, you're having a good game as a rifler, you can dumpster, you can get tons of stats, you can get tons of kills, it's fine. You're having a bad game as a rifler, it's hard to consolidate. It's not with an op, it's yeah, I'm having a bad game as an op, let's just go back plat, let's just go car. I'm just gonna get a kill for free. Someone's gonna walk into me, or I'm gonna get flashed off angles and I'm just gonna save, Shiro style, right? as a rifler, you have to actually be in the action. So you have a bad game, you're gonna have a bad game, right? Like if you're really struggling, there's no real way to actually get around that, you know? So it feels like rifling, people have forgotten that Donk just makes it look like rifling isn't that hard. It's fucking harder than opping, man. I mean, at the top level, it is straight up. In order to farm stats, it is absolutely harder. And so to see Donk pulling off better, I think he's better stats than Simple, or even if it's similar, like the Prime Simple, with a rifle is fucking unbelievable, especially because you even count in the positions, the roles he's playing. He's getting opening kills. He's not pulling off a cold zero where he's like, always got Taco around to support him. He's like going in, his teammate takes the bomb site, he plays the after plant, which is again, something that's more calculated, something where you can get higher percentage plays. Donk is going into 40-60 duels. He's going into 50-50 duels all the fucking time. And he's getting multi-frags. He's killing the initial player and he's killing the player that's supposed to trade on him. But you know what he's doing here? He's gonna lose this round, okay? He's gonna lose it. He's stuck in CT. There's really very little you can do. They know he's in CT, so they know there's nowhere he can go. And in this case, I mean, do you really want to hunt that badly if you're Na'Vi? Not necessarily. I mean, you know that the Spirit's pretty broke, but at the same time, you don't want to force the kill onto him, especially because he's in a position where if he's injured, I think he might not take 100 damage in CT there. I'm not sure if the bomb was planted for long. I'm not sure exactly where it was planted from. But he definitely, you know, if he takes... Oh my... Did he just dink this guy? He just fucking dinked Wonderful. That is so bullshit, dude. This is disgusting. No, get this off my screen. No. I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this. Donk, best Dust2 player of all time. Fuck off.